Good morning. My name is Katia and I'm going to present Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni. Techniques. He created some of the greatest fresco paintings and architecture the world has ever seen. In his frescoes, Michelangelo never created his forms with a soft focus and believed it was more important to create figures with clear outlines, which was a Florentine tradition. When Michelangelo created the frescoes in the Sistine Chapel, he did not consider himself to be a painter because during his career he had primarily been working with sculpture. In his famous artworks, we can see the Sistine Chapel ceiling, the Torment of San Antonio, the Last Judgment, Doni Tondo, and the Crucifixion of Saint Peter. As a meaning of his artworks, we can see that in the Sistine Chapel there's a meeting between God and Adam that is reminiscent of the classical myths. Man and God have been placed together and communicating. Despite the pagan elements, there's a clear Christian message in the piece. Michelangelo was obsessed with the human form above all else, and unlike Da Vinci, he rarely spent time working with nature. Thus, in all of his works, he focused his energies on understanding the form of human figure. Michelangelo thought that the human body was a beautiful entity that should be naked or only wearing simple robes. Michelangelo revealed his hero waiting to meet the enemy rather than in victory. Furthermore, he showed David's strength through his sinewy body that reveals the future power he will display. Michelangelo used his advanced knowledge of human body to create his nudes. Furthermore, Michelangelo was primarily interested in how concrete figures could be encompassed with an outside shell. The colors in the Sistine Chapel was painted with bright light colors that daringly harmonized. Michelangelo painted freely and with great dynamism. Michelangelo had a keen eye for light and shadow, and grasped that they can represent volume and shape in both a sculpture and a painting. Thus, he created many freestanding sculptures, whereas Leonardo da Vinci painted his figures with straight axles and lines. Michelangelo was more inclined to introduce curves and diagonals. Unlike da Vinci, Michelangelo produced figures that twist around and complemented each other's forms. The topics he used to paint were the result of the High Renaissance because during it there was a marriage between the Catholic religion and Greek mythology. Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci. Da Vinci's sfumato technique, where he blurs the lines and boundaries, brought realism to his work. He didn't think people saw sharp lines but rather an unfocused smokiness. He said the technique was without lines or borders, in the manner of smoke or beyond the focus plane. Leonardo was a master at chiaroscuro. This technique uses the contrast of light and shadow as a modeling technique for achieving the illusion and plasticity in three-dimensional volume. Leonardo's version of the technique involved varying the darkness of a color by adding black pigments rather than making it a more saturated or richer hue. In his famous artworks, we can see the Salvator Mundi, Mona Lisa, Vitruvian Man, Last Supper, and Lady with an Ermine. As a meaning of his artworks, we can see that he analyzed everything about the human face to better understand how to paint it. For his masterpiece, Mona Lisa, he dissected the human face to understand the muscles related to the lips. Da Vinci wanted to impact. He wanted to move the viewer. In The Last Supper, the attention to detail is where you can find the insights. Notice that Christ is at the center of the table with an open body language. The entire image centers around him, and the window arch even appears to crown his head. Da Vinci ensured that each disciple had a different reaction to Christ's statement. Many asking, "Is it me? Look at the faces." They displayed concern, shock, anger, and bewilderment. Judas, second to the left of Christ, who was the betrayer, is leaning away from Christ. In front of Judas, there is a spilled vessel of salt. Spilling salt on the table has often been associated with a bad omen. On his palette were muted earthy browns, greens, and blues within a narrow tonal range. This helped give a sense of unity to the elements in the painting. No intense colors or contrast for him, so no bright red for Mona's lips, nor blue for her eyes. His paintings were filled with topics such as religion, portraits, nature studies, as botanical and anatomical. Artists coexisting. Michelangelo and Da Vinci stood out as strong and mighty personalities, with two opposed attitudes to art. Yet there is a bond of deep understanding between them. Da Vinci was 20 years Michelangelo's senior, and each had his own set vision about art. Their fierce independence led to clashes whenever circumstances, such as simultaneous commissions for cartoons of the Palazzo Vecchio, brought them face to face. Leonardo and Michelangelo, for all their different ages, different styles, and their enmity, had one thing in common: neither liked to finish anything. By the time Leonardo was commissioned to paint the council hall, everyone knew this about him. What no one knew was that Michelangelo, who had been prodigious, was to become dilatory and difficult. In fact, Michelangelo's abortive work on the Battle of Cassina marks the beginning of the pattern of non-competition that was to mark his life. Leonardo's inventions and paintings. Da Vinci's inventions and paintings are related to the stubbornness of said artist for detail in every aspect. As we see, his sketches are full of it. We also mentioned that he has dissected bodies to learn every detail about them, which we can observe that perfectionism in the sketches of his inventions. Michelangelo's statues and paintings. As well as in the paintings or statues of Michelangelo, we can observe the fine details of each wrinkle, curve, expression, sensation, and emotion that the model or person in the work is transmitting as if you were seeing it face to face in reality. All to show the sweet beauty that Michelangelo himself could see in them. My favorite artist is Michelangelo because his works are full of bright colors. They show the beauty of naked body more or less. What he showed also had part of Greek art, and I'm a fan of this. Almost every single little thing that can be Greek. And now we say goodbye. Thank you for your attention.